longevity is about keeping your body in balance.
Yeah.
And so there isn't necessarily one protocol for every human. Now, there are great diet plans and nutritional supplements that should be the foundation of everybody's plan. But, when we were kind of joking about me doing cold plunge as well, that's not for everybody.
Welcome to the Energy Upgrade Podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Grutman. And if you are a high-achieving woman, a successful entrepreneur, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just a woman with kick-ass big dreams, you're in the right place. If you value your energy, your health, if you want to be a biohacker, tap into longevity, if you want to raise the impact you have in this lifetime, you're going to have a lot of fun around here. As a second-time seven-figure business creator, certified health practitioner, and soul biohacker, I'm here to reconnect you to your energy, to the soul of your business, and to your superpowers. Let's go. Welcome home. Welcome to the 100th episode of the Energy Upgrade Podcast. Oh my God, I can't believe we are here. To think that this podcast started in February 2023, and that since I have not missed a single week blows my own mind. And to celebrate, of course, I didn't want this episode just to be any episode. I am so excited and so grateful for you to hear this conversation with my mentor, Dr. Stephen Cabral. Dr. Cabral is a naturopath, ayurvedic functional medicine practitioner. He's the founder of the Integrated Health Practitioner Institute, where I got certified. He's also the author of the Rain Barrel Effect book, which, by the way, you absolutely need to add to your holiday shopping list, to your holiday gift guide. It is a transformative book that will help you understand the root cause of any symptoms you may have. Now, today, this episode is going to be really powerful and exceptional for any of you feeling like you want to understand a little bit better, perhaps where some of your symptoms are coming from, but also understanding, the order of things and when to tap into longevity and what is longevity and how to start, working with this whole biohacking world. And then Dr. Cabral, being the incredible entrepreneur that he is, I couldn't help but also ask him a few questions around that towards the end. He's a dad of 2 daughters. So we also talked about, when we know what we know, when we do all this work on the holistic health side, and we get to know all the toxins, all the chemicals out there, how do we navigate this with our kids? Now, I know this episode is going to inspire you. It's going to really open up your field of possibilities, whether you are wanting to perhaps become an integrated health practitioner for yourself. Because Dr. Cabral's vision when he launched that institute was to bring a health coach into each family so that we can become better with our bodies, more connected, more sovereign. And so perhaps you want to do it just for your own sake, your own personal knowledge. This is how I started, and then it turned into this beautiful coaching business that I'm now so proud to have. But it really started with my desire to heal myself and to have the knowledge in order to heal my family as well. So I will put the links if ever the Integrated Health Practitioner Institute is something that you are curious about. I will put the link in the show notes. We will talk about it more during today's episode. But I tell you, if you can maybe sit down, relax, and really take this episode all in, because Dr. Cabral is just a wealth of knowledge. And he is just such a great human being as well. So I hope you will enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Happy 100th episode, because I'm celebrating this with you. You have been part of this success because you are showing up every week. I show up. And so thank you for being all in. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And let's cheer to another 100 episodes. Thank you. And let's dive into it. Dr. Cabral, oh my goodness. I am so excited to have you here today on the Energy Upgrade Podcast. Thank you for saying yes.
I appreciate being here. It's amazing to get to chat with you, and just see your growth over the last few years has been phenomenal. I mean, you've always been one of our top IHPs, and just to see you kind of move through and provide your knowledge and experience and expertise with your community is phenomenal. So appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you. What a way to start. Incredible. I'm just as my community knows that you've been a huge inspiration for me, a big mentor, and it's just an honor. And today, by the way, this is our 100th episode. So,
Amazing.
for me, this feels like full circle because it all started with you, with me taking the integrated health practitioner course. You are just such an amazing teacher overall, but also just lover of life. But it hasn't been always like that for you. And I feel like we should start from the very beginning so that my audience can understand how, like, what you had to overcome in order for you to be here today and be teaching, the world basically with all this innovative content. So maybe share your story. Where did it all start for you?
Yeah. And that's why I think that's for me, I just have a different perspective because I understand how bad life can really be.
Yeah.
And I know that life can be really challenging for many people in life for many different reasons. Sometimes it's financial hardship, sometimes it's relationships, and sometimes it's health. And for me, it was health. As I grew up in just a normal family, whatever normal is, by the way, in air quotes. I was certainly, it wasn't, well, it was an interesting upbringing. I was the oldest of four kids under 5 years old. So it was pretty tight. And, I just had a normal childhood for the most part. And then I was always, though, the perfectionist type kid to just kind of set the stage. I was the oldest born, I'm sure, looking to compete for my parents' love and all those things with four kids under 5. And that may have led me to just be more stressed. But either way, when I was 17, I got extremely sick. And this is back in the mid 90s. And doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. My entire immune system essentially was shutting down. So I had swollen glands. You basically have your lymph nodes underneath your neck or right around your neck, under your armpits, in your groin, back of your neck, all sorts of different places. But all of them were swollen, like the size of golf balls. It wasn't small. Like they were visibly swollen. And I wasn't a big kid. It was just basically growing up at 17 years old. And so my mom brought me to the doctors, the local pediatrician that we always went to. And from there, it was 2 years of going to over 24 different specialists and just running my blood work, doing CAT scans, like doing everything to figure out what was wrong with me. They thought I might have cancer because I had white blood cells were off, but that was it. And it's a long story. It was a 10-year journey. But eventually I started to find what was called back then maybe functional medicine or integrative health. And a doctor ran these at-home lab tests that looked at my cortisol levels. They looked at food sensitivities. They looked at my gut health. And from there, they actually found that I had Addison's disease, that I had, which eventually led to type 2 diabetes, and a host of other issues, mast cell activation syndrome, POTS, insomnia, and then I developed rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune condition. So as I said, like my whole body was going downhill really fast, but doctors couldn't diagnose it with blood work alone. It was only started when I moved towards the integrative realm that I then even just discovered there's a whole new realm to health beyond conventional medicine.
And as I'm hearing this, I just can't help but think, as this teenager, the emotional toll it must have taken on you. Like, you probably had this thought, if there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, like running 24/7 in the background. And so I appreciate that even in your teachings, you always include the emotional aspect, which I found was missing in so many teachings because it is so instrumental. And I'm curious to know, like, was that indeed what was happening? Like lots of limiting thoughts and you learned to overcome that as well?
Well, I mean, even when I tell that story, as I'm telling it, it's still told in a very convoluted manner because the whole time was chaos. Yeah. All we had were questions and no answers. Like even as I started to go to natural health practitioners, okay, it's your adrenals, it's food sensitivities, it's candida overgrowth, it's SIBO, it's H. pylori, it's mast cell activation syndrome, it's brain fog, it's fibromyalgia. Like I had so many things wrong with me that they had no idea what to do. Like it was just such a mess. And so that's as I started to go through this process, I started to learn a lot, of course. I mean, I took it upon myself. I am just I'm stubborn. I'm driven. I, don't want to take no for an answer. And that allowed me to then read hundreds and then thousands of books. And it's all that I did. So when people are like, well, like all I did was study health. That's it. They didn't do anything else. And so I was young and that allowed me to do that even through undergrad and all that. Like I didn't find school overly difficult. And so I read other things, became a certified nutritionist. I became a personal trainer, became a yoga instructor. I even got certifications in things like Reiki. And like, I just did all of it to try to figure out my answer. And then one day I read a book that my mentor wrote, Dr. Margaret Smith Peet. And it wasn't a crazy different book than the 1,000+ books I read before that. But this one spoke to me and I reached out to the author. Lo and behold, I'm living in Boston or just basically south of that. And she's in Maine. And I was like, oh, I go to Maine with my family to a small cottage, every summer. And she said, I will meet with you. She's in her later 60s, early 70s by then. And she helped me put it all together. And so I credit her with that. Like I had done the work, but sometimes there's like, before you came to IHP, you've already done the work, but I hope that we just help put it together in a manner that is actually a system that someone can follow, because there's just too much information and it's absolute chaos. And so for me, yes, I was depressed. I had anxiety. I was overwhelmed. I was told that people with Addison's disease and my condition don't live a very long life. So I was expecting maybe like late 40s, early 50s. Okay, so like, do you even start a family? Do you get married? Because like, what's the point if you're not going to be here in 25, 30 years? So yeah, it was a horrible time to be alive for that decade. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
But it's through hardship that we get to see really what's inside of us. And I feel like, isn't it amazing that every day you're here helping, healing thousands and millions of people? It is just so incredible. And so I'm curious, of course, after that, you went and traveled to, India and China and learned about traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic, and you really went all in. And how did this rain barrel? And I really want to talk about this. And I have the book here. If you're listening and you haven't read The Rain Barrel Effect yet, you have to pick that up. The best read ever. You will gain so much time, so much clarity from that. But I'm curious, when along the way did this rain barrel effect concept came to life? And to this day, I guess that is still something you're referring to all the time, right?
It is the thing. It's why we get sick. I mean, it really is. And so for people who have not heard the concept before, I may have helped to move it forward and maybe popularizing the term, but I didn't make it up. It refers to, and I always say, like, I like to give credit where credit is due. I've read, thousands of books. I've traveled all over the world as part of my degree as a doctor of naturopathy. I studied in India multiple times, in Sri Lanka, in China, for traditional Chinese medicine hospital. I was in Europe. I studied all over the U.S. And the reason I did that is that I'm very skeptical by nature. And so I still thought, because again, I grew up as a kid in the 80s and we'll call it like 90s. And so you're very much conventional medicine based. You believe that there's a pill for every ill and you just need to find the pill. Well, when I went into natural health, I kind of thought the same thing. Well, there's one way of practicing. If I find that way, that's what's going to heal everybody. So they don't need to go through their own 10-year journey. They can get well, faster with like the healing pill, but it's natural. And so what I found was that Ayurvedic medicine is amazing. Traditional Chinese medicine, amazing. Bioregulatory medicine. All these things are great, but no one modality is the right fit for every person at that one right moment in time. And that became really evident right away on these internships. So I immersed myself in it because I do have I'm skeptical, but I have a very obsessive personality, which is, this is not a bad thing, but I'm very careful then of what I allow myself to do. So like, I no longer allow myself to play online chess or any of these things because I just get completely obsessed. And so I stick to, my family, which we'll maybe talk about later, yes, my work and my health. And like, okay, that's enough. And you can go all in on that. Now, what it allowed me to do, though, was to really say, okay, so the natural health world is probably more complicated than the conventional medicine world. Because in conventional medicine, you just run your blood work. And if things aren't out of range, they tell you you're fine, even if you're not. And then when they become out of range, they just give you a pharmaceutical that matches up with what's out of range. I mean, with the brilliant minds of medical doctors, that's what they're, relinquished to be doing for the rest of their life. It seems like such a waste. It really does. Like they're so much smarter than that. And so it's not on them, it's the system. And so for natural health, Well, you could do acupuncture, you could do nutritional supplements, you could do functional medicine detox, you could do water fasting, you could do a million things. So what do you do? And so I obviously was practicing then in Boston. I opened my second location, which was a functional medicine center. We were very fortunate. It was all word of mouth. We were booked out for 6 months after the first year. And so we were busy and life was amazing. I was working a million hours now. I had 2 young kids and I didn't want to open up more locations because it was just like, honestly, I didn't want to burn out again. And so, and it wasn't my path. I've always loved to teach. So what I wanted to do was do 2 things. One, create a free podcast and then basically create a free book. The book is the manual for exactly what we do. This is how people get unwell. This is how people get well. And it's the same every time, but different practitioners just put their own little spin on it. And that's okay. Like that's an amazing and beautiful thing. I have the way that I do it and I know what I do works and other practitioners know what they do work, but it has to follow the framework. So I know that I'm answering this long, but basically what the way that we get unwell is that we fill up this proverbial rain barrel. And if people never heard about a rain barrel, basically a rain barrel catches water coming off your home, like through gutters, because if not, it pours onto your grass or patio and it just destroys it. So it catches that rain, that drift. But what happens is over time, the rain fills up that barrel. And if you never empty the barrel, it will eventually overflow. So now we live in a world where you might be overly stressed. You might be working a job at high school. You might be trying to score well on your SATs. You might be, as I said, working a job, trying to get good grades. You're dating, you're trying to go with your friends. You're trying to get into college and you're taking antibiotics for 3 years all at the same time. That was my story. Yeah. Right? So my rain barrel and eating very poorly, drinking Arizona iced tea every day after sports practice and going to get a slice of pizza with my buddies, like drinking Kool-Aid. Literally, this is my fault, not my parents. I drank Kool-Aid every morning instead of even juice. Like that's how I grew up, eating Fruity Pebbles.
You didn't know. No. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, but it still affects you. That's what I like to share with people. Like, it's not necessarily your fault, but it doesn't mean like that it's not affecting you. And so I filled up the rain barrel. And then all of a sudden, one day at 17 years old, I woke up, my eyes are swollen, my glands are swollen. I've got a fever and it sets off now 10 years while I've filled up my rain barrel. And the only way then to get well is to empty that rain barrel. And that's the de-stress protocol I then share in the book, The Rain Barrel Effect.
Yeah. And you often share how usually it's 2 things. We got to empty the toxins and replenish nutritional deficiencies. And it's usually one or the other. So let's talk about, how we empty the rain barrel. You've come up with this incredible detox, the liver detox. It's something that to this day, I do every season. I do not miss it. It is the #1 thing I recommend to my clients. And I'm so proud. I've supported more than 1,000 women on this now. It's your protocol. But okay, so tell me more about how you came to, because you started Equilife, which is your company for supplements. How did you come to formulate this particular protocol? Because it is very, very well done. And it's so powerful. And people can't believe it, that in just 7 days, literally their life is turned around. So tell me more about this. How did it come together? How do you use it? All of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And so, and you're right. There's only 2 ways that people get unwell, and there's only 2 ways then to get well. Now, the complexities are around that, and that's why we need to personalize it. And people really should be working with practitioners like yourself. And that's, we have nutritional deficiencies and we've built up toxicities. The toxicities are what we'll talk about in a second, because the nutritional deficiencies are just more widely known and regarded. Like, that's easy. You might be deficient in folate or B12 that people have heard about before. Or maybe it's omega-3s or magnesium or vitamin D. People hear, or iron, right, with anemia. So people kind of know about those. You might not know which ones you have if you haven't done any lab testing, at-home lab testing. But what people don't know about, and they're finally hearing about, are toxicities. I remember even on the most popular podcast, 5 or 6 years ago, people were kind of making fun of toxicities like they were making fun of leaky gut when I had that 20 or 30 years ago, right? And now they're finally realizing like, oh, there are something called forever chemicals, PFAS, right? There are things like fluoride, which lower IQ in kids. Like, that's irrefutable. you might think that fluoride's amazing for stopping cavities, but it does lower IQ as well. And it does lower thyroid function. So it's like they can both be true, like if you want them to. So toxicities are really what we're trying to share with people. And the ones that we are most ubiquitous are there are pesticides everywhere. There's heavy metals, aluminum just in your own home, in the dust particles. There's mercury. There's lead sometimes in just the water. There's arsenic in some of our food. So the goal isn't that we can't worry about these things 24/7 because they're there. So then what can we do in order to lower our total toxic load? And so back in the day when I first started practicing, so I first started about the year 2000, and I started practicing what we'll call integrative health in around 2010, like all in at 2010. I was doing a little bit before that, but not all in. And so at that point, I had a lot of people come to me with autoimmune issues, which are pretty challenging, right? That means you've had it chronically. An autoimmune issue does not happen overnight, contrary to popular belief. And so what I did was I had to open up the drainage pathways. That's the kind of the new term they call it, but it's your liver and kidneys for the most part, because you get rid of toxins from your liver, and we can get as deep as you want, but these are like entire seminars, right? Yeah. So we move all the blood through our liver, which is the filter of our body, about every 6 to 12 minutes. And if the liver doesn't do its job, it passes on to the kidneys, and the kidneys are not meant to filter all of these extra bacteria and et cetera that moves through the body. And then a little bit through the lungs. Well, we used to use over 10 products in 2010 for what is called a functional medicine detox. It ramps up basically liver detoxification. That's what it does. It just makes your liver is doing it every day. There's no doubt about that. But this does it in a much faster manner, and incorporates intermittent fasting, meal timing, low toxicity based foods, things that people weren't even talking about 15 years ago. And what happens is by the end of that 21 days, if it's your first time ever, or 7 days, you get remarkable relief. And that sets the stage then for a more personalized protocol. Now, I said, okay, like people are getting exceptional results. And I was just using autoimmune, and then I started to bring it to general population because people were dropping inflammation and brain fog and balances and weight, which they weren't able to do before. So my goal was, how do we simplify this? Yeah. And so I turned it from being like $300 or $400 to $99 and only 3 products. Because when you want to bring things to the general public, meaning like not in a bad way, you have to keep it really straightforward. So we just took all the ingredients that we needed and put them into 3 products. And so, yeah, if people can only do one thing, that is the place to start. Just remember that it's the place to start, not the finish.
Could your body be begging you for a detox? Doing a seasonal liver detox has been my biggest biohack these past few years. Not only does it help me boost my energy, increase my restorative deep sleep, reduce my cravings, bloating, inflammation, and puffiness, but it also gives me the biggest brain clarity boost that usually is responsible for my next genius idea. The 7-day functional medicine liver detox I recommend is not like a juice cleanse. Here, we're really supporting the liver in eliminating toxins that have been building up in the body for years. Because yes, we're all exposed to those toxins every single day. If you're curious to give it a try, I'm offering you a 15% discount when using the code podcast at checkout on my online store. Plus, you'll be receiving my step-by-step online detox course to guide you through the process. I've helped more than 1,000 women feel like themselves again with this detox. Don't miss your chance to also feel like yourself again. Use code podcast at checkout for 15% off. I hope you enjoy it. I love that you touched on things like forever chemicals, because I remember at first when I started to talk about liver detox, I'd get a lot of pushback, people saying, well, your liver is meant to, detox on its own. You don't need to do anything. And so I remember at first I was like, oh my gosh, okay, how do I answer this? And now seeing so many clients, and so it's just so obvious that our liver is needing extra TLC, like it's needing extra support. And if it's someone even that's in the optimization longevity space, it needs to be on your radar. Like your liver is just exposed to so much. And it was never really designed to be exposed to forever chemicals and things like that, right?
No, there's over 100,000 man-made chemicals in the environment. Exactly. So when I wrote the Rain Barrel Effect, there was over 77,000 that we could clinically prove through the World Health Organization, others and about 8,000 in Europe. So if you look at it, okay, it's about 10x in the United States as to what is allowed in Europe. And that's becoming like more now pronounced because people are talking about how the cereal ingredients and different things are different in different countries. But nobody was talking about that even 5, 6, 7 years ago. And this is like really new, which is great. And the whole other thing about your liver is always detoxing. Yes, so, or you literally would be in sepsis. You wouldn't be alive if your kidneys and liver weren't detoxing. However, I thought the same thing. But the thing is, we've now run over 500,000 labs. And you can just run a minerals and metals test or a toxicity test, like environmental toxicity, and you will see all of the chemicals that you're being exposed to.
Yeah.
And this was known even 20 years ago. And they did blood work, serum. It's just, people I think like to naysay everything. And so this is just one more naysay. And it's, and it's okay that people say that. I just don't want to hold anybody back from getting well. Like, that's the thing, is like, that's why we guarantee everything. It's, hey, if you don't get results, it's okay. Like, no big deal. But we know that you will. And that's why we're able to guarantee those results. And also, again, starting point, not finish point. We know in IHP that we start with the functional medicine detox, and then we move through a gut healing protocol or heavy metal protocol or whatever is needed for that individual.
Mm-hmm. What I love is when you do the detox, after that, it's like we've cleared the cloud. We get to have a much clearer picture. It's okay, what symptoms are left? And then where do we need to go next? And of course, using labs, at-home labs, which is so fantastic that you offer that. Here, I'm in Canada. Literally, if we didn't have access to what you are offering, we'd have nothing. So
it's unbelievable. Yeah, in Canada and a lot of other places around the world, you don't get even options. Like, it's very difficult.
It feels like we are 20 years behind. So oh, well,
yeah.
I'm thankful, grateful for what you offer and for the access to it. So thank you for that. So now I'm curious. Of course, you started with the detox. You do all the other protocols, which are very individualized. I know you have been working a lot on longevity. I know it's been like your big focus these past couple years. You even started the HPH certification for, human performance.
Yes.
So I'm curious to know, like, what are you working on these days, and what's your focus? I know you were sharing how you finally are trying some cold plunging and exploring and having fun with that and your workouts. But what has been, I guess, a key breakthrough in some of your longevity findings?
So with longevity, and I'm not different than anybody else. Like, I'm human looking for that one, pill for the fountain of youth. It just doesn't exist. And so it'd be great if it did. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. Even things like GLP-1s, okay, the side effects are tremendous for people.
Yes.
It's Botox for your stomach. I mean, that's really what it is. It causes gastroparesis. And that's why you're not hungry. Like, it just slows down digestion. So then what does slowing digestion lead to? Poor bowel motility. What does poor bowel motility lead to? Bloating, cramping, improper digestion of nutrients, and then eventually SIBO, candida overgrowth, etc. Now, it's not for everyone. I'm not going to say that, but a good third of people seem to have real side effects from this. And so it's just an example. There just doesn't seem to be that one thing because the human body is so complex. So when I look at longevity, what does matter is early prevention. So like, that's what I've really come to realize, is that all of us are bio-individual, meaning like we have these bio-individualities. We are unique. So the first part is we need early detection. So the problem is a lot of that's expensive. But in HPH, high performance health, I do show that, okay, you can't run a full body MRI. Well, what can you do? Maybe you can do the blood, like a specific blood test, like a Cabral test.
Yes.
And then you look for potential cancer-based markers, because that's really what we're talking about. Well, in general, and I'm sure you've shared this, humans really only die before the age of 100 from 5 things: cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure and stroke, type 2 diabetes complications, cancer, and Alzheimer's. Okay, well, all of those are able to be detected a decade to 2 decades in advance, and that includes Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Cancer is the wild card because it could just, like, it is developing inside of our body, but we can't detect it early enough. So a full body MRI or a Grail test can show it when it's at like a couple millimeters. So it can detect it at a very small amount. Heart disease, we see that happening since you're 30. So like, we can start that. And Alzheimer's, when you do the full body MRI, it looks at your brain. You can also do a SPECT scan. And you'll start to see the initial stages of Alzheimer's. That's not something to worry about. That means, okay, I need to get to work. And so I don't get Alzheimer's. So early detection is the first piece. I'll stop there, and then I'll talk about what the second piece is, what we need to focus on for longevity.
And I'm curious, even just to, I know you've done the Prenovo scan. Is that the one that you recommend when you're talking about the full body MRIs?
Yeah, so there's basically Prenovo, and then there's Simon 1 by Simon Med. Simon 1, excuse me, is about half the price. And it's a great scan, but if you can afford the Prenovo, and I don't work for them, I don't get compensated by Prenovo, it is, instead of going to a hospital-based setting like a clinic, it is a spa setting.
Yeah.
And when you get your results, super easy to understand. Not the case. Now, Simon 1 is changing the back end, so it'll be easier to understand your results because they get it. It's a whole new market. It's not just MRIs for people that are sick in a hospital, but it's actually MRIs for people that are looking to be preventive. So for right now, and I know that you probably get discounts as well. I get discounts with Prenovo that we just pass on to people. Yeah. It is worth it. And if you come up with Claire, then you probably don't even need to get one then for 2 to 3 years. And that's great. So I do recommend it. It is expensive. There's no doubt about it, but worth it. And then there's the Clearly. So I recommend, by the way, the non-contrast MRI, which means that there's no dye injected in your body.
Okay.
But there is something called the Clearly. If you have heart disease that runs in your family, it will actually look at an AI-generated 3D image of plaque growing in your arteries around your heart, which is so important because that's the number one killer for both men and women. And it can happen to men in their mid-50s. So it's a great one to look at. And if you can't do that, though, which is expensive as well, then you could do something called an ultrasound of your carotid artery in your neck, your arteries in your heart, and the peripheral artery down to your calf. And that's great, too. And that's only a couple $100s. So these are great. I have basically the top 10 labs to kind of go through in HPH, but those are really big ones. And it saves lives. I mean, inside of IHP, inside of HPH, we've already had like a dozen people say that them or their husband found something and is now able to take care of it, which is unbelievable.
I know. So that's the early detection that you have been, and you've been taking yourself through all of that.
Oh, you've done it all. Yes.
Yes. And then, so what's the next step?
Well, so the next step is like, what do we need to do in order to live longer? And so I can tell you this, because I do like when people listen to your podcast or my podcast, I want them to know that it can be a source of truth that's unbiased. People right now claiming you're going to live to 180 years. There's no evidence whatsoever that humans can live past 120. There's none.
I wonder who you're speaking of.
What's that?
I wonder who you're talking about.
I never name names. But here's the thing. It's not like these aren't good people, but it's all marketing. Like it's all, listen to me and you'll live to I'm not going to say that. What I want to help people do is live to a healthy 100. That's the goal. Yeah. Because we know that's possible. It is possible, right? I mean, like that's it. And so, but you can't get heart disease. You can't get high blood pressure. You can't get type 2 diabetes. You can't get cancer, and you can't get Alzheimer's. All right. So now that's the early prevention, because there are, believe it or not, reversals for all of those. Well, like those scientifically proven. And like we can go step by step. Now, again, the wild card is cancer. It is not easy to reverse stage 4 cancer. And I'm not going to say that it is. So you need to find it in stage 1. That's the goal. And then we can do whatever we need to, both natural and conventional medicine if needed. You know, if you want to have a tumor removed at stage 1 and it's not going to affect any other area of your body, I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm going to support you on that. And let's do natural things as well. Like whatever people want to do, I'm there to support them, right? But you can't do that with Alzheimer's. That's not how Alzheimer's works. And you only get one heart. And so like things are a little bit different as to how you fix them. But for longevity, what I've realized is this. Longevity is about keeping your body in balance. Yeah. And so there isn't necessarily one protocol for every human. Now, there are great diet plans and nutritional supplements that should be the foundation of everybody's plan. But, you know, when we were kind of joking about me doing cold plunge as well, that's not for everybody. If you're more prone to anxiety, burnout, hypothyroidism, et cetera, you don't need to be shocking your body in 37-degree water. Like that's not for everybody. And the only reason I started to add it in is because I've increased my exercise very slowly and very gradually. And it does help with me balancing and modulating inflammation. Now that I'm in my late 40s, it does help with that. Mm-hmm. And so, but for a lot of people, it's like the hierarchy: good nutrition, good exercise, not too much, right? But not too little. Create little hermetic stresses in the body. Get your 7,500 to 10,000 steps per day. And then what do we move on to? Sauna. And then what can we move on to? Good nutritional supplements. And then, well, maybe some hydrogen water. Maybe like you can start to add on all these great things, but not at the expense of the foundation, right? Taking nicotinamide riboside or nicotinamide mononucleotide is not going to make up for not walking 10,000 steps a day. Like it's just,
yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, and the GLP ones and the shortcuts, they're so tempting. Like even me, I thought, oh, okay. I read a lot about the microdosing. I'm like, oh, maybe that should. And then, back to your point, I love that you're saying it's the Botox of the stomach. It's like, is it worth it? Again, if we're going through the lens of longevity, it can't be. It can't be worth it, long term. So I appreciate.
Well, and if you think of like Botox for the skin, okay, you've got like a little bit of bacteria introduced. Is it harmful? Is it not? Debatable. Doesn't seem to necessarily affect longevity. But when you shut down systems of the body, like a GLP-1 does, that could very well affect your overall health and longevity. And we don't have 10 years of data on that. So it is experimental right now. And so that's what I ask people to be careful on. Maybe instead try something like a berberine or other things, inositol, like whatever we need in order to balance whatever's going on. There's so many great things to help with blood sugar and fat burning, because those are important. It is challenging to get to 100 years old if you are 40 to 50 pounds overweight. And so I do get that, and I appreciate that. And our first thing is in our practice is if someone needs to lose 30 plus pounds of weight, focus on that, because so much health comes out of losing that 30 pounds. Exactly. And then after that, we focus on specific wellness-based issues. And then after that, we focus on longevity, because you can't really focus on anti-aging and longevity if you are 40, 50 plus pounds overweight, or you have health-based issues, because those have to be rebalanced. Now, having said that, none of us are perfect. Like I don't walk around every day with everything functioning at 100%. Some weeks I'm a little bit more inflamed. Some weeks my sleep isn't as great. Some weeks, like, it's just part of being a human, but I don't have any diagnosed diseases anymore. There's no more autoimmune. There's no more Addison's. I don't have any more spring allergies. Like I don't have any of these things. Wow. And so that means now I'm just a regular person who gets an ache and a pain every once in a while, or a poor night's sleep. Like that's just normal.
Yeah. And now you have so many tools that you can use to optimize yourself. But yeah, that's really important to work on any symptoms first, get yourself better, then have the conversation around. And this is the thing about, biohacking, for example, this whole world. When I tap into it, people think it is the one pill that fixes it. It feels almost like the pharmaceutical industry have the same type of frequency where it's like, oh, if I biohack, I become superhuman. And it's like, no, wait, you got to do the healing first. Yes. Because we can't optimize something that's broken. So we need our foundation solid before anything else. And I feel sometimes that's the conversation that's missing in the biohacking space, where we're rushing towards all these external flashy things, but we're forgetting the basics.
Well, one thing I can say is that I don't take myself very seriously at all. I take the work that I do very seriously. And the one thing that I'm proud about with IHP is that we have not had to walk back a single thing we've said or recommended since the inception. And that is pretty rare. And that's because we don't jump on anything the second it comes out. So we never recommended the keto diet. And we never recommended all these things. Think about everybody who says they're the carnivore doctor or the keto. They're all gone. They all eat carbohydrates now. And so, like, there's a time and place for everything. I'm not going to say that there's not, but we are not about marketing or hype or any of those things. We want to get our message out. So we have to try hard. Like, I want my podcast to do well and my books to do well, because then I feel more people are going to be helped by them. But we don't say sensationalistic things. And I know you don't either. Yeah. And so although maybe we don't have the 5 million followers, what we do have is a community that I think can trust what we do say and what we do recommend. And also that we don't go to extremes. The extremes are never the answer. And in the end, you don't get as much benefit because you burn yourself out from doing, honestly, too much without staying balanced.
Yeah. And you said something, longevity, the key is balance. So it is in everything, right? So I appreciate that. Quickly, I know you are a dad of two daughters. I am just curious. I know we have a lot of moms listening. Like, so knowing what you know, how do you support them through their own, evolution and journey? And how strict are you, or like, what is your take on how to navigate this toxic world with, two growing daughters and growing brains and, knowing everything you know? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
So it's first you have to lead by example. And that I've tried to do. Now, I was very fortunate. So, I said that it was it was a hard childhood. And then it was a hard 17 through 27. But after that, I was an old man living in a younger man's body. And by that, I had already seen how devastated my body could be. And I said, this was a gift that I was given to now live life differently because I was a perfectionist. I was angry. I was irritable. I was all of those things, like the pitta-based mentality. And then I just channeled it and said, like, I can't believe now I have all my energy back. Like, I lap my family in terms of energy and all that. My two daughters, my wife think I'm crazy. Like, I'm the one who's always talking at dinner, making dad jokes, like all of the things. I do my workout. They see me and I don't stop. So from when I wake up, I actually have my own hour routine, which is not crazy. It's easing into the day, and it's a little bit of me time before then. I help my daughters get ready for school. They need me less now that they're 10 and 12. But just knowing that I'm there in the morning, and then when they come home, they usually have an after school activity, and then it's dinner and games and family time. So it's trying to develop a connection, but also I've instilled it from them since they were younger. And we didn't allow any of those things when they were very young. So like 0 through 6, 0 through 8 for my first daughter, none of that stuff, like none. So it didn't really warp their taste buds as much. But then now, yes, of course, like they're 10 and 12, and I have to walk the line now of I can't be too strict because psychologically then it's going to set them up to a bad spot where they've been restricted too much in their life. So we let them have really almost whatever they would like on occasion, but we don't have it in the house.
Yes.
And so we'll go out for whatever that thing is. And if we're at a party, we don't exclude them from doing anything. But there's a couple things that are just no's, and we've taught them about that. No food dyes and no artificial flavors. Because here's the thing, kids are also different. My oldest daughter doesn't affect her at all. Youngest daughter, she becomes a different human. It affects her. She's not the same child.
Yeah.
She gets angry. She gets moody. We don't even know her when she's had something that is not okay for her body. So as a parent, though, I have to say, listen, this is not okay for you. You see how you're acting. And after she comes back out, she's such a sweet girl. And she's like, I know. She's like, but when I'm in it, I just can't. And I'm like, I get it. And so that's when you take some time to yourself. We understand. My wife and I are aware. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but 90, use the 90-10 rule. So 9 out of 10 meals are clean. 1 out of 10, you're having essentially whatever you would like. And so that's basically what we do.
Yeah. We're very similar that way. And I think, leading by example is key, and talking openly about what we're doing and why is helping. And now I see my daughter even, talking to her friends at school being like, hey, have you ever tried this? Or so it's fun to witness, but you're right. It's making sure they're not excluded and making sure they're not feeling like they're the weirdos, the different ones. I find sometimes can be the challenge.
I take them food shopping. I like them be a part of it as well. Yes. And so that's something that we do too. Like on the weekend, I just say, hey, and we just go pick up some healthy things. And then one thing that they may enjoy, but again, it's not going to be artificial flavors, sugars, those types of things. And so that's a big part of what we do. And we'll make a lot of different types of food. So we make our own healthy pancakes or healthy waffles, or we even made our own healthy ice cream with that little Ninja Creamy. And so like, it's fun things that you can do that allow them to have the same things, but that are much healthier for their bodies.
Totally. I know your time is counted and it's so precious. I want to quickly just ask to finish. You are a very a very busy businessman. Also, you are running multiple companies, whether it is the IHP, Equilife. Um, do you have any piece of advice? I know you're strong on success mindset. I love the quotes that you always share on the weekends on Instagram. Any piece of advice for any women that are building their own empire, their own legacies, anything that you'd like to share? Because I know you've had to overcome a lot of like highs and lows, and it's just the world of entrepreneurship feels like that. Anything that you'd like to share to finish?
Yeah, and I actually, so I don't talk about this, publicly a lot, but I work with a couple of mentees. Like I mentor a couple up and coming health business owners, or sit on advisory boards and that type of thing, but not a lot, because that's not, I like to teach, but in this way, I'm still teaching. Here are the pitfalls, so I can maybe help you better with this. One, you go into something that you don't love. You do it because you think there's a business opportunity. That never works,
No.
like ever. You're never successful, because you have to move through so many challenges in order to become successful. Now, that's not a bad thing, but you just have to, because you just have to stick with something long enough. Typically, it's 18 months in order to make it work. Like you'll know in 18 months. I've always said that with every business owner is like, you kind of get there by the end of the first year, and then you're definitely there by 18 months. As long as you have a plan, like you have to execute on a plan. For me, if I get into anything new, I always just hire a coach. I hire a mentor, because I'm just like, hey, you've already done this for 20 years. First, I typically read a book or a course on the subject, and then I try to hire the person if possible. It's not always possible. And then I shortcuts it, right? Because you just don't want to make all the mistakes yourself. Like that's the point. And so what I can tell people is this: one, you have to love what you do, so you wake up with energy every day doing it. And so, it's not every day. Like we'll say I have one bad day a month where I'm just maybe stressed or whatever it is. Like it happens. And I'm like, I don't really want to do this, but I don't stop everything just for that one day. So you just stick with it. And the other part is that don't try to serve too broad a community. It's much easier to be successful now than it was 10 years ago, and certainly 20 years ago. I started out 25 years ago, even before that, but full-time 25 years ago. And it was difficult because you had to open up an actual physical location, and you had to only serve the people. What's that?
And run ads in the newspaper.
Yeah, literally, I ran ads in the newspaper. Like I ran a couple, and it was all word of mouth, and it was so hard. And so there's that. Now, you don't need a huge community. I love the article, and I'm sure you can link this up. 1,000 true fans or 1,000 true followers. It's amazing. That's all that you need. And you run a wildly successful business. I will tell you that I've run small, I've run moderate size, I've run large. Equilife is a huge company helping well over 100,000 people a year. We've run over 500,000 labs, hundreds of thousands of people a year. And here's the thing. That's not a better business than a solopreneur working with, like, doing 10 to 15 hours per week of helping clients. Like, if you think, I don't want to get too deep into the rabbit hole, it's different. It's not better. And so I love them all. And I just felt that with me, once I tackle one, then I want to say, okay, how many more people can I reach? Like, that's ultimately the goal, but that shouldn't be everybody's goal. If you want to be successful and you really don't want to have a crazy life and you want to be able to turn it off, focus on one particular niche. Women going through menopause, or children with food sensitivities, or kids with celiac. Just pick one niche and become a master in that area, which is then not difficult, because then you only need to read like 10 to 12 books, and like you'll know everything you really need in that. Then it just takes experience, right?
Yeah.
Then you need experience.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing life. It's an amazing career. And I can't recommend it enough, the health field.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned 18 months, because I feel like that's what it took for me to go from, becoming an integrated health practitioner to really exploding. And it was 18 months of commitment, of showing up, of being all in, and also to stick to my zones of genius and stick to what I knew I had overcome in my own life. So I really agree with that 18-month mark. It's so important to stick to it and go all in on that. So thank you. Thank you for putting together the integrated health practitioner. If you're listening and you're thinking, ooh, maybe I want this for myself. And I love what you were saying. The IHP, you started it because you wanted a coach and like a health coach in every family.
Yep.
And that's why I took it at first. It was to heal myself. And I thought there's nothing in that I will learn and not use. And to this day, I still use all my tools every day, every week with me and my family members. So thank you for putting that together. It is so well done. And it changed everything in my life. And I will be forever grateful for all your knowledge, for your passion, and for you, the incredible human being that you are. So thank you. And thank you today for your time. I so appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thanks so much, and keep up the amazing work.
Yeah, and we will see you somewhere online. Thank you.
The information shared on this podcast is for information purposes only and doesn't provide any medical advice. Vanessa Grutman does not cure, diagnose, or treat disease. Please consult your physician before trying any new protocol or product.